Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess it's hard for me to talk about this appropriation since it's been coupled with the teacher raises. So I do kind of have to address both at the same time. I'll start out as Vice Chairman of the Budget Committee. I voted twice to increase school funding by $7.5 million for salary increases during our budget hearings. As a son of a Sumner County school bus driver for 33 years, I understand the importance of classified teacher pay raises. Growing up lower middle class, watching my parents struggle to pay the bills, I understand the necessity of these. So I hope I'm able to vote on these school budgets tonight because I do support the $7.5 million. I hope this will be my third time to vote on that. But I have a problem with the $5.4 million one-time capital ask. In October 2023, it was brought before us funding for bleachers or athletic facility upgrades at 5 different schools that we went beyond the scope of bleachers. And I did vote to support the $15.8 million that was appropriated at that time for that project. And however, I cannot support an additional $5.4 million because I feel that it is a request forged in falsehoods and false narratives that have changed continually. And that is to cover for basically what citizens are telling me and what I perceive as, in my opinion, mismanagement of funds that were originally given. And because the scope of the work changed outside of the public eye, the public purview, it increased by $8.2 million, or 67%, for what we voted on last October and what we were told it was for last October. And then it gets changed. And also, the amount of work gets reduced to 3 schools instead of 5 schools. Increased by $8.2 million, but the work actually decreased. And this, all in my opinion, is without adequate public notice. The school board got notification 2-3 hours before their meeting in June. And I don't think 2-3 hours without being a published agenda for $5 million is adequate public notice under state law or even law that's been challenged in court. I know if the County Commission would have done that, everybody would have been screaming bloody murder and we'd have a lawsuit. And that's just a fact. I do want to call out several important factors about the Sumner County School Board budgets, if you allow me. I may get called out of order, but that's fine. The county's not reducing the school's budgets or asking them to cut it. We are simply sticking to what the Budget Committee originally offered and agreed to in May, $7.5 million for salary increases for teachers and classified employees. So we were able to do this because, in my opinion, we cut our own budgets last year by $14.2 million because the previous commission left us on a trajectory towards a tax increase. And we had to make some hard cuts last year. And we did it. And the schools did accept the recommendation from my motion that was voted on July 15, 2024, to accept the $7.5 million for teacher raises and correct their mistake of asking initially for a $7+ million that they reduced to $5-point-something million. And then they eventually, none of this was ever agreed upon by the Budget Committee or talked about. And so they did remove that. And it was interesting that my school board member, who represents me, is Stephen King. He made a motion in June to restrict $5.4 million in capital, or excuse me, not capital, but in reserves from the school board budget in case they needed that money to plug in the gap from the bleacher or athletic facility overages. They historically only spend 92% of their budget, which means they would have money left over every year. Historically, the schools have reserves that increase and have grown exponentially over the past 10 years. So the funding is there. School board member said it was there. King said it was there. He actually was laughed at, told it wasn't possible. But then yet again in July, the school board comes back and basically does what he suggested, was restricted $5.4 million in their budget for the comptroller. So I talked to a school administrator that wanted some perspective if we're separating out the $5.4 million capital ask, because everybody's saying it's for teacher raises, or if you don't support this, you hate teachers, or teachers aren't going to get their raises, which is not true. The state has provided almost $40 million between last year and this year for teacher raises. $31.4 million was last year. $7.6 million is this year for that allocation. And while enrollment has remained flat, the school board continues to hire newly created administrative positions when the basic need is in the classroom instruction or classroom teacher raises as required by state law by fiscal year 26-27. Governor and the state legislature passed that law. They're requiring us to do it, and we've got 2 more years to get to that $50,000 threshold. I understand everybody wants to make that go faster. The Budget Committee agreed. We said, hey, $7.5 million. We know classified employees aren't covered in that mandated increase by the state. So what can we do to help that along as well and give that in? 22-23, $14 million was allocated from the state and $8.7 million by the county towards the schools that is newly recurring funding. 23-24, the state gave again $31.4 million last year for teacher raises. This year, the state's given $7.6 million. Budget Committee recommended $7.5 million. That's $15.3 million more in newly recurring funding towards teacher raises. And people talked about social media and comments, and I agree with a lot of those things. I think it's egregious to leverage $5.4 million in a one-time capital fund spend against teacher raises to say that you hate teachers if you're against this 5.4. I can't support this 5.4, and I hope it doesn't make it past the floor of this, because it might affect how I have to vote on the school budget, because I don't get to pick apart the school budget. I have to vote it up or I have to vote it down. If there's something I don't agree with and that I feel passionate about or convicted about or my constituents have instructed me on, and not supporting the $5.4 million. I hope it's not coupled together, and that's just me. So I cannot support this, Mr. Chairman. It's been mentioned we have $30 million in our capital, $20 million we set aside for highway to improve our road infrastructure, which I supported that in the Budget Committee. I know there was some consternation there on how that happens, to make sure we don't increase MOE. Our finance director had some good suggestions on how we could do that. We still have time to make those adjustments, which I think are good steps if you watch the last Budget Committee. And we also have around $10 million in capital that is restricted right now. Now, one of the budgets the county mayor submitted for capital was $3.8 million to repair this building, for structural repairs to the building in order to repair the roof, $3.8 million. So if you set aside the $20 million and you look at that $10 million, we're being asked to reduce that by $5.4 million. And if we have to spend $3.8 million, which is pretty easy to do in this county on maintaining buildings, we're left with less than $1 million in capital for the entire year for our county to take care of our own household. I don't believe that's the right thing to do, especially when the schools do have that $5.4 million in their reserves that they can restrict. They've already done it. There's nothing holding them back from putting a spade in the ground. Those tracks could have already been completed or started at least. Nothing happened. The money's there. And so I disagree with this, and I will be voting no on allocating any dollars from our capital. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Mansfield? No.
Well, that's really respectful. It's really civil. It's very Christian of you.
Listen, everybody, calm down. All right, go ahead.
I do want to address a couple of comments that were made. $5.4 million.
You're not supposed to. I'll get you there.
You called the question, I guess. Does that not count? But, I mean, I'm happy to yield.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. It was mentioned a $5.4 million or a list of things for that the school budget is going to be used for and safety needs. I want to remind everyone this $5.4 million is not for safety needs. It's not for anything else. It's strictly for athletic facilities, and that's what the MOU agreement that was proposed by the school board was about. It's not for anything but athletic facilities. Again, bleachers fell last August. October, we approved $15.8 million. December, the schools tried to use a method that was against state law. They failed in that method. There was delays. It's not the county commission's fault for those delays. And then in June, when this was brought up again, when the overages and the bids came out, They're saying, oh, well, we got to have this money for teacher raises. That was not true. In July, it comes back and said, well, we can use this money for anything. And then it comes back, finally, to the real issue, overages on athletic facilities. It was mentioned about the Gallatin tracks. School board member Josh Graham spoke in 2021 to use money that was, the school board voted $3.5 million to give towards an old horse barn instead of fixing up tracks. And he said, use that money for the Gallatin tracks. And he was ignored, and they voted to give that money for an old horse barn. And we didn't even own that barn. So I don't want to hear, hey, this was important, when it was ignored and you're wasting money and wasting funds on other things that weren't a priority at the time.
Video just bit dust. I got. What's that?
Well,
Sir, there's commission, I've been contacted by folks,
No.
the video feed is down.
no.
Can we check
Go
it?
ahead, Commissioner Manson.
I just wanted to clarify the $5.4 million, again, is only for athletic facilities. It's not for any kind of safety needs at any school. And that I wish the Gallatin tracks would have gotten fixed with that $3.5 million back in 2021. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier about tax increases. I just want to remind people, and I've said this before in the previous commission, just because what you're doing today does not require a tax increase today doesn't mean it's not going to cause a tax increase next year. Our finance director sent out a letter to the entire county commission back in October that said if the school department takes on the construction, renovation, and maintenance of athletic facilities that they have not done in the past, it will require additional revenues, i.e. tax increases. He said, also confirmed that debt service fund for us does have a limited capacity for new debt for construction or renovations without additional tax revenues. So I think it's important to note, just because the narrative is saying we're not having to raise taxes this year, if the trajectory is to move on in the way the schools are projected, it will require additional tax revenues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Same thing here, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I've supported the $7.5 million for the schools. I did not support the $5.4 million in capital, and the reason it's giving. I don't think I can vote for this budget with a clean conscience. I was hoping to be able to vote on both of these budgets tonight. I'm sure the narrative is going to be that I hate schools, I hate children, and voted against teachers, and I didn't. I voted twice for the raises. Fortunately, I can't separate what they're going to get from this budget, and I only have one choice and one voice, and it's an up or down. And unfortunately, this would have been hopefully my first school board budget in 6 years to vote for, and this would be 6 years in the running. 2019, I voted against tax increases, and they said it was for teachers and that I hated teachers, and wasn't true. And I think 21 or 22, we voted for more for the school's budget, but I just couldn't vote because of things that are in there that I didn't agree with. I hate that it comes down to this way that we don't get a chance to separate out things and argue on that side. I wish I could vote for this. I do support the teachers getting raises and the classified staff. I did support that in budget, but I just can't support the entire school budget as a whole with $450 million in it in total. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.